Crested Butte, Colorado. The end of summer. 1885. Abigail Hawthorne stood on the steps coming down from the train. Competing odors immediately came over her. The fresh evergreen breeze from the Rocky Mountains fought with the mechanical odor of the train, and both mingled with the smoky haze that emanated from the small town. It was home to only a few hundred people, but it supplied 1,000 or more miners in the county. She adjusted the bust on her dress and tucked the small pillow she was sitting on under her arm. Fortunately, her dress was not in the Victorian style common in the East, or the train ride would have been simply unbearable. Lowering her gaze, she saw her 3 traveling companions looking at her. 2 of them looked very unusual compared to the townspeople. The first was a short, thin, balding man, very well dressed and wearing glasses. Edmund Horace was a lawyer from Denver, who had been her father's attorney for the past few years. What bothered Abby was that he rarely smiled, and when he did, goosebumps ran down her spine. They, and most men, were overshadowed by the man they called Swede. Jonas Swanson was a mountain man. He was nearly 2 heads taller than Mr. Horace and 3 times as big in the chest. Abby wondered how he could find suspenders big enough to put on all that muscle and not take them off. The third man she would have recognized in any crowd. Even though he was dressed like most people in town, Abby knew she would recognize his gait and manner of speaking anywhere. He was a handsome man with black curly hair and a black beard. His big blue eyes and outgoing personality made him stand out from the crowd. Besides, he was already Abigail's husband of 5 years, Thomas Hawthorne. "Stay close," her husband warned as he helped her down the stairs. "This is no place for a lady." Who knows, she thought, holding back a bitter chuckle. She knew it was in his blood. It had been his life for over a decade before he came home. She looked into his eyes and saw the excitement he was trying to hide. A year ago, that look would have made her heart beat faster, but now it was a reminder that she'd given up on him. "Like a moth to a flame or Icarus to the sun," she sighed softly. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Horace interjected, "please stay close to us. Unfortunately, an attractive woman is rarer in these parts than the gold and silver these men seek." "Thank you, Mr. Horace. Both my husband and the Swede are packed in iron, and I know the Swede has weapons as well. I feel quite protected. But I will be careful and stay close." Horace nodded and turned to the Swede. "You take our things, and I'll go look for this Bachman and his transportation." The big man hummed and nodded. The Swede rarely spoke. Abby had always assumed it was because he didn't speak English well, but he seemed to understand her perfectly. Abby looked at her husband and saw that his smile was partially hidden by his beard. His eyes looked around the city as if he was searching for something. "Do you really miss him?" "What?" he replied with surprise on his face. "You used to look at this place as your long-lost lover." "Well, that's a bit dramatic, but yes, I do miss this place from time to time." "So you're planning on leaving again?" she hissed. "Damn it, woman, save your venom for someone else. Yes, I miss you. But I'm still here, aren't I? I'm still married to you and living on the ranch." "Look, Abby," he sighed, "I know this trip has knocked you out of sorts. I can't wait to meet him face to face either." Abby took a deep breath and calmed down. She knew her husband was right. She had been on edge for the past 4 months. Everything seemed to be falling apart. Now she was about to face her ex-husband, and it promised to be a nightmare. "I'm so sorry, Thomas, you're right. This trip is disappointing. Things haven't been going well since Sarah ran away last May. Now we have to face Jeremiah again, and that brings back a lot of bad memories. You know this meeting has to happen. As for Sarah, I already told you I didn't do what she says. She's still mad at her father. But I'm sorry she ran away." "I know," Abby replied. "She never forgave us for getting married. You were drinking heavily at the time." "Damn it, Abby. Not here and not now." He growled at her. Abby turned away and looked around the small mining town. She forced herself not to think about the last few months. She remembered better times. She had moved to the Colorado Territory with her father, Henry Thompson, when she was only 6 years old. They left Pennsylvania a few months after her mother died. It was 1860, just a few years before the Great War between the states began. They came to Colorado a few years after the gold rush at Pikes Peak or Boost. Her father did not seek gold, but sought wealth of a different kind. He bought a ranch that was one of three that occupied a small valley on the southeast slope of Pikes Peak. This valley could become very valuable if a railroad was built through it. Their ranch adjoined two others located in the valley, the Old Man Wilson Ranch and the Hawthorne Ranch. Old Man Wilson lived up to his name and seemed to feud with almost everyone. Hawthorns, on the other hand, were just over the moon. With so few other children in the neighborhood, she was lucky to have two children of close age as neighbors. Abigail immediately became friends with the two Hawthorne brothers, Thomas and Jeremiah. She was the same age as Jeremiah, and Thomas was a couple years older. All three grew up and became inseparable. Abby smiled as she remembered how they would play together for hours after finishing chores. Even then, the brothers were polar opposites. When they played, Jeremiah was always the lawman and Thomas was always the outlaw. She, on the other hand, always played the role of the sufferer or princess. It's funny how I was drawn to wanderers then, she chided herself. I caught him, and he's a fool. I wouldn't be surprised if he's still restless now. They had only lived on the ranch a few years when the war broke out. It didn't affect Colorado much, but it touched the Hawthorns. Mr. Hawthorne left a wife and two little boys and went to the war when Thomas and Jeremiah were only 11 and 9 years old. He was gone only 2 years, but when he returned, he was a changed man. Abby remembered him boisterous and full of laughter, but he came home mangled and broken. He lost his right arm and was partially blind in his right eye. He had also lost his spirit. Abby could count on the fingers of one hand the number of times she heard him laugh after he came home. Her father said he had died in the war, but his body just hadn't laid down yet. His condition was a heavy burden on the family. Mrs. Hawthorne cared for him, but everyone knew she wasn't very interested in the ranch, so Thomas and Jeremiah ran it under her father's care. Abigail dreamed of staying in the valley and starting a family, and it seems Jeremiah dreamed of that too. Thomas had other dreams, and ranch life didn't interest him. His temperament and sense of adventure matched his vagabond spirit. She loved both Thomas and Jeremiah. Jeremiah was her castle, her knight in shining armor, and Thomas was the pirate who stole her heart. Like most dreams, reality shattered her when soon Thomas left to seek his fortune in search of gold and silver in the Rocky Mountains. It broke her heart, but made it easier to choose. Jeremiah was her future. She and Jeremiah were married. The only unpleasant moment in those early years was after Sarah was born. The labor was hard, but her daughter was born healthy. Unfortunately, after that, Abby was unable to carry another child for longer than a few months. Abby was heartbroken, but Jeremiah became a pillar of support for her. His love and attention covered her, and her love for him grew. But it wasn't strong enough, was it? She thought to herself. Henry Thompson, too, was busy at this time. A small village had sprung up at the mouth of the valley. It was not large, with only about 50 people, but it had everything a town needed. There was a store, a church, a blacksmith store, and a boarding house with a tiny saloon in the backyard. Abby knew her father owned a stake in almost all of these establishments. No wonder the town was called Thompsonville. She and Jeremiah had been married just over 6 years when Mr. Hawthorne quietly passed away. Not surprisingly, Mrs. Hawthorne decided to go to San Francisco and settle with her sister. Jeremiah told Abby that his father had left the ranch to him and Thomas on the condition that they take care of their mother. A year later, in 1877, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad engaged in a war over access rights. The most notable incident was a major clash when Bat Masterson and his Dodge City strongmen, hired by the AT and SF Railroad, took over a roundhouse in Pueblo. Eventually, one of the D and RG Railroad men bribed them to leave. In those few years, there were rumors of burned homesteads and people driven off their land. Fear reigned in the valley. It was then that her father brought a Swede to the ranch. Despite the Swede's presence, the war on the railroad affected the entire valley. One night, Wilson's ranch burned down. His grandson and his new wife had come to the ranch a few months earlier to help. Old Man Wilson died in the fire, and his grandson was badly burned. Not a week later, the grandson and his wife left, but not before selling the ranch to Henry Thompson. Her father said they did it because the grandson wouldn't be able to recover, and they wanted to keep him away from the railroad at least for a while. Jeremiah always questioned the details of those events, and the relationship between her father and her husband soured dramatically. This greatly aggravated her marriage, and she felt like she was constantly defending her father to Jeremiah. As the railroad wars continued, Abby's marriage began to slowly deteriorate. They quarreled more and more often, and there were fewer and fewer nights when they didn't go to bed angry with each other. She realized that they had both failed each other. She had stubbornly rejected all his advances, and he had given up trying, giving in to frustration and anger. A while later, Jeremiah told her that he had to check on something and would be gone for a few days. When she asked him about it, he said he just wanted to make sure of something. 2 days later, he left. The next day, the nightmare began at the Hawthorne Ranch. It was 2 months before Abby was able to meet Jeremiah. Taking a deep breath, Abby closed her eyes and remembered one of the worst days of her life. Next chapter. Thompsonville, Colorado. Spring, 1880. Jeremiah drove cautiously up to the ranch. He knew things were not right. The last 2 months had brought him no satisfaction. First, he had gone to Leadville to check on his father's investments. Once safe, he traveled to Denver to find out when Henry Thompson had laid claim to the Wilson Ranch. Something wasn't right. The dates he gave Abby didn't match up with how things really happened. He went to the law firm Henry used and asked some questions. He was advised to talk to Mr. Horace, who should be back in a couple of hours. He went to the saloon across the street to wait. Not 30 minutes later, the man accused him of insulting his family and hit him. A few minutes later, both he and the man ended up in the Denver City Jail. He was tried and convicted, despite his statement that he had never seen the man before that day. 30 days later, he was given another 30 days for unknown reasons. After his release, he went to the attorney's office again but was told that Mr. Horace was out of town. He was also told that the documents he was looking for were missing. The man speculated that Mr. Horace might have them for some reason. He realized the strangeness of what was going on when he reached Thompsonville. Walking into a small saloon, he found that Pedro and Maria Mendez were gone. The new owner served him and disappeared. A few minutes later, he reappeared and informed Jeremiah that he was no longer welcome. Surprised and annoyed, Jeremiah left and headed home. When he got to the ranch, there was a meeting waiting for him. Abby was there along with her father. Besides them, a Swede and a small, well-dressed man were there. To his surprise, Jeremiah noticed that Thomas was with them as well. Jeremiah quickly got off his horse and approached the group. "Tom," Jeremiah said, smiling, "when did you get back?" "About 6 weeks ago," Thomas replied coldly. Jeremiah was surprised by his brother's answer, but quickly turned his attention to his wife. Walking over to her, he reached out to enclose her in his arms, but instead he felt her hand slap his face. "You bastard!" Abby screamed. "How could you do this to me?" "What are you talking about, Abby?" "Maria Mendez, and don't play dumb." "I'm not playing dumb, I just don't know what you're talking about." "Maria and Pedro visited us 2 days after you ran away." "I didn't run away. I went to Denver to check on a couple things before I talked to you about it. When I got there, a stranger accused me of something and then started fighting me. I spent the last 2 months in the Denver City Jail." "Why did you end up in Denver?" "Abby, we need to talk about this in private." "No, we'll say whatever we need to say right here. I know why you ran away. Maria told me everything." "What are you talking about, woman?" "Maria said she had a child." "Oh my God," Jeremiah snorted. "Whoever his father is, we'd better run before Pedro gets to them." "She said it was you, you bastard. She said you were the father." "Me?" Jeremiah replied, shocked. "And you're right," Henry interjected. "Pedro was displeased and came after you." "Pedro never spoke to me," Jeremiah declared. "This isn't funny, y'all." "No, son, it's not funny," Henry said patronizingly. "Don't you ever call me that, you hear me?" Jeremiah growled. "I'm not your boy, and I never touched Maria. Abby, you have to believe me. She said you did, and then you shot her Pepe." "What?" Jeremiah hissed. "Is Pedro dead?" "No," said Henry. "You just shot him in the arm. I didn't shoot Pedro, and I certainly didn't sleep with Maria." "That's not what they're saying," Henry continued, "and that's not what they told the Colorado Springs sheriff." "That's a lie. Where are they? I'll get to the truth of it." "They're already gone," Abby exclaimed with tears in her eyes. "Yes," Henry replied calmly. "They left shortly after talking to the sheriff." I think they were headed for Santa Fe or even farther south. What, they just picked up and abandoned their boarding house and saloon? No, I bought it back from them so they'd have the money to start over somewhere else. It stinks in here, Henry. It smells like someone's trying to set me up. Jeremiah turned to his wife. Abby, you can't believe. Jeremiah's heart dropped when he saw her in the arms of Thomas, who was comforting her. The expression on his face was replaced with anger and deep sadness. No, he howled. Abby, please tell me you're not. Thomas, why are you holding my wife? She was in pain, Jeremiah. After what you did, she was in pain. I didn't do anything, Jeremiah replied sharply, the anger beginning to return. So you came back just in time to fly in and take my place? Is that what you're telling me, dear brother? How long have you been sleeping in my bed? Thomas answered nothing and pulled Abby tighter against him. You son of a bitch! Jeremiah growled and headed toward Thomas. Unfortunately, he was so focused on the pair that he didn't notice the giant shadow moving towards him. The Swede hit him once, but it was more than enough to knock Jeremiah out. When he came to, he was lying on the floor inside the room. He struggled to get up and leaned against the wall to keep his balance. In front of him sat Henry and a short, well-dressed man. Swede stood next to them, followed by Abby and Thomas. Where's Sarah? He wheezed. She's back at my ranch, Henry answered calmly. We didn't think she needed to see that travesty. Ashamed of yourself, Henry? You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm sorry, Jeremiah, but that sounds very hypocritical coming from the mouth of a man who impregnated a girl and then shot her father. I didn't do anything like that. They said you did. Jeremiah looked around the room for those who might believe him, but found no one. Regardless of your denial, Henry continued, there are some things you should know. The sheriff in Colorado Springs has issued a warrant for your arrest. Mr. Horace and I have persuaded him not to turn it over just yet. Mr. Horace? Yes, Mr. Horace is my attorney from Denver. I have mentioned him before. That's the man I was looking for in Denver. They said you had the papers I was looking for, the one about Henry's purchase of land on Old Man Wilson's ranch. Why were you looking for that particular one? Inquired Henry. Because the date you say Wilson's grandson sold you the land doesn't match the date of the deed. If my calculations are correct, those documents were written before Old Man Wilson died in the fire. That means you're lying about what you know about it. That's absurd, Henry pouted. I had nothing to do with it. Mr. Hawthorne, I assure you that you are mistaken, Mr. Horace added. So where are these documents? Your office said you had them. They were wrong too. I don't have them. That's all nonsense, Henry interposed. It's just attempts by the guilty party to slander others to lessen the gravity of his own actions. Boy, you ought to know that I'm the one preventing the warrant from being issued. Now, unless you want to become a criminal, I suggest you listen carefully. Mr. Horace has some papers for you to sign. They will transfer your part of the ranch to Thomas. In exchange, no warrants will be issued. Your wife and daughter will be taken care of for the rest of their lives. My wife is a cheating whore, and my traitorous brother is taking care of her. Abby gasped and clung to Thomas. Jeremiah took a step toward the couple, but the Swede stood in front of him. Sit down. Don't make me hurt you, the giant growled. Jeremiah looked into the faces of his accusers. He realized he had lost. Spending time in the Colorado Springs jail was useless. Henry would find witnesses to lie against him, and Thomas would still get his share of the ranch. Fortunately, his father had foreseen the potential problems associated with the ranch. It was a small victory considering what Jeremiah had lost. There was no choice but to back down. He agreed to their terms and asked to say goodbye to Sarah before leaving. They refused. They told her that he had run away a month ago. That day, Jeremiah Hawthorne left the valley a defeated man. Next chapter. Crested Butte, Colorado. End of summer, 1885. Abby, remembering that terrible day, brushed a small tear from her eye. Jeremiah had seemed so sincere in his denial of his actions, but the evidence against him indicated otherwise. She herself was worried about her actions at that moment. Did I give up on our marriage too soon? She asked herself. What if Jeremiah was telling the truth and didn't run away? Then I really was an adulteress. Upon meeting Mary, Abby found herself in a quandary. For the first few days, she couldn't get through the first few days without heavy sobbing. It was 2 weeks after that meeting when Thomas returned. She wished she could say she hadn't thrown herself into his arms, but she knew she had. In them, she found comfort, protection from the storm that was tearing her world apart. 2 weeks after his arrival, he tracked her down. He had shared a bed with her ever since. When Jeremiah returned, he realized she had changed and now belonged to Thomas. 3 months after the confrontation with Jeremiah, Thomas and Sarah's wedding took place. Sarah was immensely happy. She could not believe that her father could have done what he was accused of. She was only 10 years old at the time. She was young and naive. Naive? She was just a girl. What was my excuse? Why didn't I side with Jeremiah then? Why had I chosen my father and then Thomas over my husband? These were the questions she had been struggling with for the past few years. She had no answers. Sarah kept to herself, and the years that followed were relatively quiet. Her marriage to Thomas had not been easy. Thomas had become increasingly emotionally reserved. When he learned of his mother's death 3 years ago, he simply brushed off all feelings. Abby realized he hadn't seen her in over 15 years, but hoped he wouldn't be so callous to her. As Thomas continued to hide his feelings, Abby grew more and more distant from her husband. Adding to the lack of intimacy was the creeping suspicion that Thomas was unfaithful. She feared this was happening during Thomas's monthly visits to Colorado Springs. Several times she had confronted him, and each time he had denied it. Unfortunately, she had no proof. Now his wanderlust was starting to show again. She sensed he resented being stuck at the ranch, and his drinking was getting worse. 4 months ago, it had all exploded. Sarah had always resented Thomas for trying to take her father's place. It seemed her anger at him would never subside. One night when Abby was at her father's ranch, he had done just that. Sarah claimed it didn't end there. According to her, he had touched her. Thomas flatly denied it. Sarah didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to believe, her daughter or her husband. Abby was confused. Henry intervened. He reprimanded Sarah for trying to stir up a hornet's nest in the midst of their negotiations with the railroad. He didn't think Thomas should have punished her the way he did, but he believed that Sarah had misunderstood what had happened. Sarah was crushed and ran off to her room. Abby tried to comfort her, but Sarah would not allow her to do so because she was on Thomas's and her father's side. To Abby's horror, she let Sarah be left alone. 2 weeks later, Sarah ran away. They searched for her for days and even reported seeing her in Colorado Springs. That's where they lost her. Abby cried for days while Thomas tried to comfort her. Even now, Abby sometimes falls asleep at night with thoughts of her daughter. Thankfully, 2 months ago, they received news that Sarah was alive and in Leadville. The discovery was unexpected, as the man who found her was not actually looking for her, but for Jeremiah. A few months earlier, Henry had discovered that Thomas did not own a controlling interest in the Hawthorne Ranch. It seems that Mr. Hawthorne had used the 51% stake in the ranch to obtain a loan to purchase a small business in Leadville. The profits from this business were used to provide for Mrs. Hawthorne after his death. When Mrs. Hawthorne passed away, the business and share passed to Jeremiah. Jeremiah now owned a controlling interest in the Hawthorne Ranch. Henry hired a man to track down Jeremiah. His search inadvertently led him to Sarah. She lived and worked as a maid for the wealthy widow Wilcox in Leadville. A few weeks later, Jeremiah was found near Ashcroft. Now, Abby and her posse were headed there to convince Jeremiah to sell or transfer all or part of his rights to the ranch. The meeting was going to be emotional and unpleasant. "This is a bad idea," Abby said firmly. "What?" Thomas replied. "I said it's a very bad idea. We don't have a choice." "Mrs. Hawthorne," Horace added, "we must do everything we can to convince your ex-husband to sign over at least a small portion of your ranch. The deal your father is working on with the railroad requires full access through the valley." "I understand that, Mr. Horace, but I don't know how we can do that. If Jeremiah still believes we have betrayed him and set him up, we have little to offer him." "Not true. Besides the huge amount of money I'm carrying, we have a few other incentives." "Surely you don't think an apology from Thomas or me will convince him?" "No, not by itself," Horace explained. "But this, plus a good amount of money and perhaps ownership of many Thompsonville businesses, should help ease the hostility. We'll offer that the old warrant for his arrest is gone forever. In addition, we'll offer information on Sarah's whereabouts. That way he can be reunited with her. I think that will help seal the deal. I'm not so sure, Mr. Horace, she thought to herself. The look of pain and betrayal on his face that day, that look had haunted her for years. It screamed his innocence in the face of the evidence of his guilt. She was so hurt by his betrayal that it tore at her heart. Even though their marriage was in dire straits, she loved Jeremiah. His long absence and heartache had left her lost and lonely. When Thomas returned, she immediately threw herself into his arms. He had been there for her in her most difficult moment. Abby's reverie was broken by a loud voice as she approached. It was a tall man with a wide smile. "Yes, sir. We will get you to Ashcroft as soon as possible." The man stopped in front of the group. "Well, is everyone ready? We'll be hitting the road soon. The trip will be a bit slow and some sections will be quite difficult, but we should get you to Ashcroft as early as this afternoon. We'll be going over the Pearl Pass, very beautiful but a little rough." Abby realized that she had just met Mr. Buckman. He talked the whole time the group was walking to the stagecoach and then continued as they loaded their belongings. It wasn't until they were leaving Crested Butte that he finally took a breath. "I'm surprised you didn't take the train from Aspen. There used to be several trains leaving Ashcroft every day. That was about a year ago, but that's the nature of the beast, isn't it?" "What do you mean?" Horace asked. "There must be hundreds of towns like Ashcroft scattered all over these mountains," grinned Buckman. "Somebody discovers gold or silver and everybody runs away. Of course, a town springs up overnight until the gold runs out, and then everyone runs for the next rumor of a mine." That's exactly what happened to Ashcroft. About 5 years ago, a couple of prospectors got a big silver find. When they came back to Leadville, word of it spread and a real fever started. Within a few years, a township sprang up, which eventually contained over 3,000 people. There were more than 20 saloons, 2 newspapers, and even a school. A couple of years ago, Hal Tabor's wife tried to turn it into a respectable little town by throwing a big party for a bunch of chumps and dumbasses. I've never seen so many high-born people in these parts. But nothing could save the town when the silver ran out. Not a few months later, Ashcroft became like a ghost town. Now, I only make a couple flights a month to Ashcroft. Almost every month, a hunting party from Leadville or Denver hires me to take them there. A hunting party? Yes, they always go to the Jenkinses' place. Sometimes it's John Jenkins himself, sometimes it's a friend of his named Ambrose from Denver. As far as I'm concerned, he's just one of them. When it's Ambrose, he always takes this big black fellow with him. "He's not as big as you," said Buckman, looking at the Swede, "but he's big." "Is the hunting party there yet?" Thomas asked. "Yes," grinned Buckman. "Took them 5 days ago. Ambrose, the black man, and that skinny guy." "Skinny guy?" Horace asked. "Yeah, a teenager. Looks sickly. Looks a little like Molly, if you know what I mean. Never talks, but he's always taking both sides, one for Jenkins and the other for Ambrose. I think they're trying to make a man out of him. Maybe make him chest hair by taking him hunting and fishing. Though if you want my opinion, it's not working." Buckman laughed heartily at his own joke. "Mr. Buckman," Abby asked cautiously, "do you know a man named Jeremiah Hawthorne?" "I can't say I do, ma'am. But there's a man named Jeremiah in a place called Jenkins. He works as a guide at these parties. I've never heard the name Hawthorne, but I think it might be him. We can ask old Zeb when we get to Ashcroft. His daughter and granddaughter live at Jenkins' house, so they'll know for sure." "They live there?" "Yes, Desiree, Zeb's daughter, helped him run the View Hotel. She's a real beauty. Tall as the Amazons and mean as a rattlesnake. Anyway, she got pregnant and her husband died, or vice versa. I don't know which came first, and I certainly won't ask her or old Zeb. Either of them would probably bite my head off. John Jenkins built a fine house for his wife, and she gave up all business and came back to Leadville. Then Jenkins invited Desiree there as housekeeper. I'm not saying there was anything between Jenkins and Desiree, but she really is something." Bachman spent the rest of the trip on a scenic drive. Abby chuckled to herself when he started telling things she knew weren't entirely true. He was amusing. As they pulled into Ashcroft, Abby realized why Bachman had called it a ghost town. There were dozens and dozens of makeshift tents and dilapidated structures. A few buildings, however, looked well made. 2 in particular caught her eye. The first was the 2-story Weed Hotel. The second was the well-built Blue Mirror Saloon. People, on the other hand, were noticeably lacking. Only a few passers-by could be seen on the street. Buckman stopped his stage in front of the Weed Hotel. Reaching down, he looked at the hotel and then at the few remaining saloons. "Zeb," Buckman shouted, "I've got company for you." 3 older men came out of one of the saloons. "I suppose he'll be at the Blue Mirror," grinned Buckman. One of the men approached them. He was a short man with a disheveled beard and the same hair. His broad smile showed a few missing teeth. "Good evening, friends," he said in a thick Cajun accent. "Welcome to the Weed Hotel. If you'll take your things and follow me, we'll get you settled." "These people," Bachman continued, "need someone to take them to." "Mr. Buckman," Horace interrupted, "thank you for your help, but we'll take it from here." "You're welcome," Bachman smiled. "Just let me know when you're ready. I'll be back here the day after tomorrow to pick up the hunting party, but I can come back another day if you need me to." "No, sir," Horace said. "The day after tomorrow will be fine." Abby and her company went up to their rooms, then went downstairs and met on the porch. She noticed that the mule harnessed to the wagon was already waiting for them. Horace stated that he had already told Zeb what they needed, and that he would drive them 2 miles to their destination. The Jenkins house was located to the south, near Taylor's Peak. It was only a few minutes after they left Ashcroft before Horace asked Zeb a question. "Mr. A, Zeb will do just fine." "All right, Zeb. You didn't seem very surprised when I asked you to take us to Jenkins' place." "No," the old Cajun smiled. "A month ago, a stranger showed up in town asking about Jeremiah. It wasn't hard to guess that there was a fox in the hen house. If it had been a year or 2 ago, no one would have noticed. But when everyone left and this man was asking questions about one of the few that remained, it became noticeable." "How many are left in Ashcroft?" Thomas intervened. "About 100, give or take," Zeb replied. "There were over 3,500 a couple years ago, but then they ran out of silver and went on a big strike around Aspen. Most of them left before winter. Now there's only a handful left in town and a few dozen more mining silver in the surrounding area." "Sir," Abby said cautiously, "Mr. Buckman said, you have a daughter and granddaughter living in Jenkins' place?" "Bachman talks a hell of a lot," Zeb snorted. "I hope you didn't tell him anything you didn't want everyone within a 20-mile radius to know about by morning." Shaking his head slowly, he looked over his shoulder at Abby. "Yes, ma'am, my granddaughter's name is Monique, but we call her Lil Mo. She and her mom have been staying with the Jenkinses for 4 years now. She used to help me at the inn until she had the baby. Mr. Jenkins was kind enough to let her live in his new home. Now she and Jeremiah look after the house when Mr. Jenkins isn't home, which is most of the time because Mrs. Jenkins never liked it here. She liked her big house in Leadville better." "Aren't you afraid for their safety?" Abby asked. "I guess so, but it's no more dangerous there than anywhere else on the grounds. Perhaps even safer than at home, after the war. Desiree can manage quite well on her own. Besides Jeremiah, Robbie's still there. He's a bit of a fool, but loyal as a raccoon dog. They still had a couple of working hands, but they left for Aspen last fall. Of course, more of those damn dogs." "Dogs?" Thomas replied. "Yeah, a few years ago Mr. Jenkins came across 3 abandoned puppies. Turned out they were wolf cubs. They were cautious as hell, but they made damn good watchdogs. Jenkins had 2 older dogs who took them in. Now they run in a pack, are very territorial and protective of each other. What surprised everyone was how quickly they took to my Desiree and Lil Mo. One night 2 years ago, a couple of prospectors came up to the house unannounced. The dogs killed one and maimed the other." Abby gasped in horror while the other 3 men listened intently. "So no, ma'am, I'm not particularly worried. No more than any man worries about his family." "Are we going to be safe?" Horace asked. "We ought to be. It's dawning already, and I've been to this place so many times that they'll recognize me. I'll ring the bell to make sure Desiree puts them out." "Will Jeremiah be there?" Abby asked cautiously. "I doubt it. He's probably gone hunting or fishing with Ambrose. They usually spend a night or 2 out there and then go back to the house depending on what they've managed to shoot. Then the next morning they hit the road again." As they approached the clearing, they saw a bell mounted on a pole. Zeb got off the wagon, walked over to it, and rang it. He had barely had time to climb back into the wagon when they heard dogs barking and a woman's voice shouting commands. A moment later, another bell rang, which rang twice. Zeb steered the wagon across the clearing. They saw a large two-story house on a hill, and behind it, a small tavern and barn. "That'll be Jenkins' house," Zeb announced. Riding slowly up to the split fence, Zeb jumped down and untied the mules. Before he could say anything to his passengers, there was a hoarse squeal. "Pappy!" A dark-haired girl screamed, running up to them. Zeb laughed and picked her up in his arms, and she squealed again. "This is Lil Mo. She's not very tall, but we're hopeful." "Pappy, Mommy says I'm going to grow up." "Speaking of your mommy," Zeb said, smiling, "where is she?" "Right here," replied a smiling young woman standing on the porch, "waiting for your old hiding man to bring a bag of curls into the house." She was tall, nearly 6 feet, and quite beautiful, though oddly dressed. She had a swarthy face indicating her Cajun ancestry. Her long, black curls were gathered into a simple ponytail, and she was dressed in a simple dress. She was also wearing pants tucked into the front of the dress. Her soft smile faded as she looked at Abby and her company. "What can I do for you?" "We're here to see Jeremiah Hawthorne," Horace said. "Is he here?" "And who is asking for you?" "My name is Edmund Horace, and we have a business proposition for him." "And there are 4 of you to ask?" she asked, scrutinizing the Swede. "No, ma'am," Horace continued. "This is Mr. Hawthorne's brother and ex-wife. They're here to talk to Jeremiah and heal old wounds. Mr. Swanson is here for our protection, since I'm bringing a decent amount of money with me." Desiree nodded. "Fair enough. I'll send Robbie to fetch him. He went with a hunting party to Taylor Pass yesterday." Robbie. A tall, heavy-set man of about 25 ran up to them. It was obvious that he could be described as touched or slow. One eye was slightly lined, and he held one hand oddly. On his face shone a perpetual smile that was infectious. It shone even brighter when he turned to Desiree. "Yes, Miss Ray." "Go get Jeremiah. He took them to Taylor's Pass." "Yes, ma'am," Robbie grinned. "And Robbie, make sure they hear you coming. I don't want them shooting you by mistake." Robbie quickly ran off, but the others could hear him cackling as he ran. "I expected them to be back tomorrow, but if Robbie finds them quickly, they should be back in a couple hours. You can wait inside, but those barking irons need to be left by the door. There is a chest behind the door where you can put them, and they will be safe. Don't bring any weapons into the house, or I'll set the dogs on you, understand?" Everyone nodded and followed her into the house. Desiree watched closely as Thomas and Swede stowed the weapons in the trunk. As soon as Abby entered the house, she immediately drew back. The house was large and luxurious, but the furnishings were ordinary and practical. The place looked more like a hunting lodge than a house. "I have some salt pork and cookies I can heat up if you're hungry," Abby said sharply, clearly hoping no one would take advantage of her offer. "And gravy?" Zeb asked, ignoring her tone. "Gravy?" Mo squeaked. Desiree threw her father a lewd look. "Great!" snorted Desiree. "Pappy, take them into the living room, and I'll go and get started." "Is that jug still hiding behind the rocking chair?" Zeb grinned. Desiree hummed and turned to go back into the kitchen. "Can I help?" Abby asked quietly. I don't need to either. I want to help," shouted Mo, trying to break free from her grandfather's embrace. Desiree sighed, looking at her daughter. "Okay, I guess I need the help now." While the men settled down in the living room with a large pitcher of moonshine, Abby followed Desiree and her daughter into the kitchen. While Mo played with a small spoon and a pot, Abby broke the awkward silence. "She's beautiful," Abby declared, looking at the playing girl. "She's a handful," Desiree replied, not looking away from her work. Jeremiah is her father?" Abby asked quietly. Desiree stopped her work and stared at Abby. "No, Mo's father died before she was born. He worked in one of Mr. Jenkins and Hal Tabor's mines. He died of a fever 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant. I was helping Pappy at the weed inn then. Then Mr. Jenkins built this beautiful house and hired my fat, pregnant ass to work here. I think he did it out of charity, but I was grateful anyway. That's when I met Jeremiah. I'd seen him a few times before that at Ashcroft. He came here following Mr. Jenkins from Leadville and worked in the mines for a while. One day, Jeremiah overheard one of the bookkeepers say something inappropriate to Mr. Jenkins. Later, Jeremiah approached Mr. Jenkins and told him of his concerns. It turned out that the bookkeeper had been embezzling some of the profits. Yes, Abby agreed. Jeremiah was always good with numbers and studied the ledgers. Mr. Jenkins was impressed and moved him out of the mines here. I think so he could keep an eye on me and also so he could study the ledgers for each mine. What Jeremiah didn't understand, he asked the other accountants at the mines. He found a few things, nothing as bad as the man who was downing money, but some things helped. He's become very successful in the last few years. Desiree looked at Abby and paused as if trying to decide if she should continue. Abby turned and began to ask a very personal question. Are you, Abby began, I mean, Jeremiah and I are a couple? Desiree replied with a smirk. Not for a long time now. We were a couple a few years ago, though. Jeremiah helped me when Mo and I got so big that I barely had time for homework. He talked to me at night when I was lonely and took care of me. After Mo was born, he took care of both of us. When I first met him, he was covered in scars. Not on the outside, but on the inside. We helped each other, I think. But we weren't lovers until a few months after Mo was born. There was something between us from the beginning. We didn't give each other moon kisses, but some kind of love was there. He's a damn good man, but we weren't going to spend the rest of our lives together. Still, I spent many nights in his bed and I doubt he had any complaints. Then the big party at Mrs. Tabor's happened, and in a couple of months everything changed. And then what happened? Abby asked quietly. Why did everything change? Jeremiah met someone, Desiree stammered. Well, special. Who? Abby asked and immediately realized she had gone too far. Desiree's eyes flashed and her body tensed. The expression on her face turned cold and dangerous. What do you care? She snarled. You threw him out like he was a piss bucket. I didn't, Abby began. Don't lie to me, bitch, Desiree growled. I know who you are. When I first met him, he was like a man who lived each day praying that it would be his last. It wasn't until Mo was born that I started to see life in his eyes again. So don't pretend you care about him. I know what you and those bastards sitting there did to him, and it almost killed him. What did I do? Abby objected loudly, her own anger building. What about what he did to me? What did he do to you? He cheated on me and got a girl pregnant. Says who? The girl he cheated with said so. What if she didn't tell the truth? Why would she lie? I don't know. Why would she lie? What reason could she possibly have for that? She wouldn't, Abigail shouted. Jeremiah was wrong, Desiree grinned. You're not blind, you're dumb as a stump. Hey, shouted Zeb from the living room. You need some help? Come into my kitchen, old man, shouted Desiree back, and you'll get a frying pan to the head. Desiree looked at her daughter, whose eyes were as big as saucers. Baby, climb on Daddy's lap and ask him if he's going to hell because he drinks too much, like the preacher says. Okay, Mommy, she said, dropped her things and ran into the living room. After a few seconds, Zeb called out to her. This isn't right, Ray? No, it's not right, she replied. So stay out of it. Turning to face Abby, she forced out a smile that gave Abby goosebumps. So where were we? Oh yes, you were going to tell me why you believe this woman and not your husband. No, wait. You didn't even give him a chance to defend himself, did you? He disappeared for 2 months. Did you even go looking for him, or did you just climb into bed with his brother that night? It wasn't like that. Well, you better get your story straight and come up with a damn good explanation for Jeremiah when he gets back. Because otherwise, he's going to kick you all out of this territory, no matter how big that Viking is. Abby took a deep breath and swallowed her answer. They needed to stay calm in their conversation with Jeremiah for as long as possible. If this was what was in store for them, facing Jeremiah would be terrifying. Abby worked silently beside Desiree as they prepared and served an impromptu dinner. A few hours later, just before sunset, they heard the dogs heralding someone's arrival. A few minutes later, quiet voices were heard outside. Abby realized that Desiree had slipped out and was probably talking to Jeremiah before he arrived. She was probably also letting him know that everyone was safe. Abby felt her stomach clench with anticipation as soon as her ex-husband entered the house. He looked the same as he had 5 years ago, except he had lost a little weight. He was no longer clean-shaven, which Abby had always liked. Instead, he had trimmed his mustache and goatee. Gone too were the soft smile and the warmth in his eyes. Now those eyes were cold and hard. That was a fool's errand, she thought to herself again. It seemed Jeremiah was about to yell at them, but he was interrupted. Mia! The girl screamed and lunged at him. Without looking, he caught her and spun her around. Her delighted squeal brought a temporary smile to everyone's faces. Jeremiah enclosed her in a tight bear hug, and she giggled. Abby felt a prick of sadness remembering Jeremiah doing the same thing to Sarah when she was little. Mo, you little rascal, go find your mommy, he laughed, lowering her to the ground. She's outside with your daddy and Robbie. The girl scurried out the door laughing as she went. Jeremiah turned and looked after them. From the look in his eyes, they all realized that all the joy had gone with the girl. What do you all want? He said coldly. Mr. Hawthorne, began Mr. Horace, we have come here with a proposition which I think will do you a great service. I remember you. You are King Henry's herald. Have you not this month been throwing orphans and widows into the streets? I assumed you got some kind of bonus for such acts, since you sold your soul to the devil. Mr. Hawthorne, I assure you. Stop it, Jeremiah interrupted him. Your assurances mean nothing. I would trust a rattlesnake more than either of you. Be that as it may, sir, I believe we have a business proposition that will be beneficial to all. There was not an ounce of mirth in Jeremiah's laughter. So King Henry finally found out he doesn't control the ranch? Found out about the stable at Leadville, did he? Well, yes. We were all very surprised. You bet. My old man may have been a little touched mentally when he came back from the war, but he could still smell a skunk. He asked the bank in Leadville to loan him money to partner with someone he knew from the war to buy this livery. Against this loan, he pledged a controlling interest in our ranch. Each month, the profits would be divided and our share would go to pay off the loan. And upon his death, my mother would be paid an allowance. That way, she would have a steady stream of money no matter what happened to the ranch. He put it in my mother and I's names, since he knew I wouldn't run away and leave her, Jeremiah said, looking at Thomas. He would have left it to both of us if you had stayed. I never wanted to stay on the ranch, Thomas stated. But when you left, you broke both Mama and Abby's hearts. I needed to get away and be alone. I don't have a problem with that. Of course, that didn't stop you from coming back and laying claim to a stranger, did it, dear brother? Gentlemen, please, exclaimed Horace. It will lead to no good. Who says I'm trying to be helpful? Jeremiah growled. Mr. Hawthorne, I understand that you are angry and feel that you have been treated unfairly. I have been treated unfairly. I was stabbed in the back by those I loved and trusted. So why are you here? Please, Jeremiah, Abby whimpered. Please listen to us. Like you listened to me? Abby blushed and spoke very quietly. You're right. What happened the day you left was wrong. It was bad and then it got worse. I'm sorry we all jumped on you like that. You, Thomas and I need to sit down and talk this out. We all have something to say. But first you need to hear what Mr. Horace is proposing, so we all have cards in our hands. Please, Jeremiah, just hear him out. All right, Jeremiah growled and walked over to a chair. Let's get this over with. Once seated, he watched everyone settle into their seats. You're a talker, he said as he continued to look at Mr. Horace. How are you going to bribe me this time? Mr. Hawthorne, Horace began, ignoring his hostility. I've come to offer you a few things in exchange for all or part of your holdings on the ranch. Jeremiah shook his head and snorted. What do you have that I might need? For starters, I have a substantial amount of money. Jeremiah didn't respond in any way. In addition, Horace continued, I have records of several documents in Thompsonville that can be used to back up any agreement we may need. Go on, Jeremiah replied briefly. Besides, I know that the Pedro Mendez incident can be made to disappear forever. The threat of a warrant will no longer hang over your head. Jeremiah leaned back in his chair and seemed to ponder. Is that all? Jeremiah asked calmly. No, other than clearing up the situation with your ex-wife and brother, Horace smiled. We have information that may help you reunite with your daughter Sarah. Really? Jeremiah said warily. So why isn't she here? Unfortunately, she ran away. Ran away? Why did she run away? She ran away, Thomas interjected, because she didn't like me sunning myself behind her back when she resented me. She always resented me for marrying Abby. Then she was smart. Calm yourself, sir, Horace replied evenly. So where is she? We know where she is, and that she is safe. We are prepared to share that information with you as soon as we finalize our business here. Mr. Hawthorne, Horace continued in a slightly condescending voice. It is obvious that you have no interest in returning to the valley. Why not sever all remaining ties with a place that brings you no joy? Surely we can come to some agreement that will suit both sides. You're right about one thing, Jeremiah said as he looked at Thomas and Abby. I have not the slightest desire to return to that valley. Since Sarah is gone, there is no one there that I don't care about. Jeremiah, Abby said softly, I'm sorry we ran into you that day. Things were so twisted back then. I know I didn't do right by you. Didn't do me right? Wow. Jeremiah grinned. I got thrown in the Denver City jail for a fight I didn't start. People I never met lied about me, and I spent 2 months locked up. When I finally returned home, I found that I had been tried and convicted without even being given a chance to defend myself. On top of that, my wife was now sleeping with my brother. I always knew you had a thing for Thomas, but when we got married, I decided you were mine. I never thought you'd turn into a cheating whore. And I never thought you'd share a bed with another woman, let alone get her pregnant. Still can't believe me, can you? Jeremiah said, shaking his head. Still can't believe that I've been set up and that King Henry is behind all of this? No, he wouldn't do that. I heard Pedro and Maria's official statements were recorded in Denver. Not only that, but they swore that their story was very different from what they told you. Mr. Hawthorne, Horace began. Shut up, chatterbox. It's my turn now. They told the Denver sheriff, he said, without taking his eyes off Abby, that they were forced to lie to you. They said the Swede threatened them and then shot Pedro to frame me. Liar, roared Swede, rising to his feet. He froze as he heard the trigger of the gun being pulled. Everyone turned their attention to the attractive Amazon standing in the doorway, aiming a shotgun at Swede's chest. Sit back down, she said coldly, or I swear to God, I'll kill you right here. The big man slowly lowered himself into the chair. Jeremiah and the Swede stared at each other. You don't believe me? Jeremiah stated firmly. Go to Denver and see for yourself. Abby looked at Jeremiah, then at the Swede. Her stomach began to turn over as she finally seriously considered the fact that she had been lied to. That unpleasant possibility was slowly creeping into her thoughts. However, Jeremiah wasn't done yet. I have a couple questions for you, her ex-husband said, turning to her and Thomas. You both, Jeremiah's voice sounded sarcastic, must have found it suspicious that my troublesome brother returned so soon after I left? Abby remained silent as Thomas answered. Henry sent me a telegram a few days after your disappearance and the Mendez's visit. How did he know how to find you? He had contacted me several months earlier. You never told me that, Abby shrieked. Thomas looked at her innocently. What was there to tell? Your father sent me a letter asking me to come home. He hoped I could help him convince Jeremiah to pool our resources and offer a deal to the railroad. I didn't want to return until I knew what kind of trouble Jeremiah was in. Brother, I'm sorry things turned out this way for you, but I didn't come back to take your place. You were gone when I arrived, and Abby was alone and suffering. I stayed for her. So Henry sent someone to find you before he sent you the letter? Jeremiah asked calmly when Thomas nodded. And then Henry sent someone to find me here in Ashcroft? Thomas nodded again. Then why was he able to find you, Thomas, after 10 years of searching, and me after 5 years of absence, but couldn't find me sitting in a damned Denver jail for 2 months now? Of course, you were both looking for me, weren't you? Surely Mr. Matpipe knew I'd contacted his Denver office. It wouldn't have been that hard to find out about me from someone in the sheriff's office, would it? Neither Abby nor Thomas could continue to look him in the eye. Guilt was written all over their faces. Truth be told, Jeremiah continued, neither of you cared if I came back. I was already guilty and condemned even without a trial. You all had already deceived me. You stabbed the man you said you loved in the back, your own relative, so you can all take back your pathetic apologies and burn in hell. Jeremiah stood before them, hesitant to meet their gaze. His face was contorted with pain, and his nostrils flared like a bull preparing to attack. After a few moments of awkward silence, Jeremiah turned to Mr. Horace. Here's my answer, Harold. Mr. Hawthorne, Horace began again. You don't have anything I need. I don't trust you enough to believe you really know where my daughter is, and there isn't much gold in these mountains for you to bribe me with. Go back to your master and tell him it will be a cold day in hell before he gets his hands on my family's ranch. It's dark outside now, so I won't kick you out of here, but in the morning I want you out. Abigail, you can stay in one of the rooms in the ranch house. Zeb, you and Robbie sleep here too. Those three can spread out in the cabin. Those barking irons will stay in the trunk until you leave. Understand? Almost everyone nodded as Jeremiah went to the door and called out to Robbie. Everyone heard him run up to the house. Robbie, I'll leave at dawn and meet up with Ambrose and the others. Could you see to it that my horse is ready? Of course, Jeremiah. Jeremiah turned to the group. You have a few minutes before Robbie lets the dogs go for the night, so I wouldn't waste any time here. Those barking irons will stay in the trunk until you leave. Careful not to wander around here in the dark. Dogs are very dangerous at night. I'm a little tired. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to bed. With these words, the group slowly dispersed. Soon everyone could already hear the barking of the dogs watching the neighborhood. Next chapter. Jeremiah sat down on his horse. The sun had just set, and he knew that some places in Taylor's Pass were still plunged into darkness. He had to be careful. Some of the cliffs there were very steep. Slowly looking back at Robbie, he nodded. Is he gone? Robbie nodded and grinned. Sometime during the night, probably before I let the dogs out. Jeremiah nodded in agreement. Robbie, let the dogs out and keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on Ray and Mo. I hope to see you tonight, and if not, tomorrow morning. Sure thing, Jeremiah. Robbie nodded. Jeremiah sighed and slowly walked outside. His skin was covered in goosebumps, and his heart was racing. He knew Horace wasn't going to give up that easily. What he, or rather King Henry, would do next kept him in suspense. Nevertheless, everything was falling into place, and stopping it would be like stopping a landslide. As he pulled up to the house, he smiled as he heard Robbie yelling at the dogs. If anyone was asleep, it wasn't now. He knew he would have to be careful as the trail ahead would be uneven. The sunlit sections of the road were breathtakingly beautiful, and those that remained in the shadows could be dangerous. Taking a deep breath, he tried to put his thoughts in order. Meeting Abby and Thomas had reopened old wounds. Past feelings of anger and bitterness tried to rise to the surface. He forced himself to focus and stay alert. At the Jenkins house, everyone gathered for breakfast. Ray was serving biscuits and gravy, much to Mo's delight. Where's the Swede? Abby asked Thomas. Asked 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 Abby asked Thomas. I don't know. He slept in the barn last night. In the barn? Yeah, he had a terrible snore. He sounded like a train, so he agreed to spend the night in the barn. He's probably still in there. Abby turned and was stunned by what she saw in Desiree's eyes. She was horrified. Next chapter. Jeremiah slowly descended on his horse into a small, shadowy ravine. His eyes had not yet had time to adjust when he heard the click of a rifle trigger being pulled. He jumped off his horse and rushed away from the sound, just as the ravine exploded with a rumble of gunfire. The dogs heralded someone's approach. Everyone began to come out onto the porch. Before going out, Thomas went to the trunk and pulled out the shotgun he had put there when they first arrived. When he went outside, everyone saw a lone horse with two riders slowly approaching the house. Jeremiah and Zeb got off their horses, and Jeremiah said something briefly to Robbie. Robbie got back on his horse and rode quickly toward Taylor's Pass. As Jeremiah and Zeb headed toward them, Abby noticed the fury on her ex-husband's face. She noticed that he kept his hand on his gun as they approached. She felt Thomas begin to slowly back away from her. Without warning, Jeremiah pulled out his gun and aimed directly at Thomas. You reach him, you son of a bitch, Jeremiah growled, and I'll blow your head off, whether it has anything to do with him or not. Now throw that barking iron out on the porch and be careful. And you, Jeremiah growled at Horace, you better not hide in those fancy clothes. I assure you. Nonsense, Zeb, search him. If you find a weapon on him, gut him like a fish. Zeb smiled and pulled out a long, thin knife. Horace turned white and raised his hands in front of him. I guess I didn't notice, he stammered out. In the inside pocket of my coat. Zeb reached into the lawyer's outer garment and pulled out a small, single-shot pistol. Mr. Hawthorne, Horace began before Jeremiah interrupted him. If you say I assure you again, I will shoot you. You're lucky you didn't try to get that thing or you'd be deader than that bastard Swede. What? Abby gasped. That bastard tried to set me up in the Taylor Pass area. He snuck up behind me and jumped me, but old Zeb took him down. He's... Is he dead? Horace asked, clearly shaken. Where's the body? At the bottom of an old abandoned mine, Jeremiah smiled. I hope he keeps Tommy Knockers company. Are you sure he's dead? Thomas asked. Sure as I'm standing here, Zeb grinned gloatingly. I put a hole in his back. You shot him in the back? He was going to shoot your brother in the back. I just shot him first. I feel safer now, Jeremiah said, then looked at Abby and frowned. Ray, search her, he said, pointing at Abby. Make sure she's not hiding anything. Jeremiah! Abby shrieked in surprise. I would never. You can't believe that. Why should I believe you? There was no reply, only an awkward silence. Take her inside, Ray. When both women were gone, Thomas cleared his throat. Do you really think Abby is armed? I don't think I trust either of you. Doesn't it bother you that Abby has a gun? Thomas said mockingly, nodding toward the house. Both Jeremiah and Zeb snorted. Thomas, Jeremiah said coldly, a pretty girl like Ray, out here among all these wolves, both human and animal. I'd put her up against any of you except maybe the Swede. Well, maybe him too because he's worm fodder. As if on cue, both women reappeared. Nothing much, Desiree smirked, at least nothing special. Abby felt her face redden, and Zeb's laughter seemed to diffuse the tense situation. The next 2 hours passed in accusations and denials. Abby and the others denied knowledge, and Jeremiah called them liars. Finally, both groups reached an exhausting stalemate when Robbie's voice was heard in the distance, heralding his return. Slowly, everyone began to leave the house to meet the returning man. Abby was surprised to see Robbie at the head of a foursome consisting of 2 men, a white man and a black man, and 2 teenagers, a skinny young man and a girl. Even though the girl was dressed in typically male attire, Abby recognized her immediately. It was her daughter, Sarah. Thank God she's safe. She breathed a sigh of relief and immediately had an epiphany. So that's how he knew so much. Surely she would have told him her version of events and he would have believed her. Her gaze slowly settled on the men coming down from their horses. An older white man had a disheveled beard, and he held himself very confidently. He was obviously Ambrose and the leader of the group. Next to him stood a large black man. Buckman was right. He was not as tall as the Swede, but just as muscular. His big, bushy beard was as black as midnight, and his wide, toothy smile was like a crescent moon on a starless night. A young fellow named Sam got off his horse, and Abby immediately realized why Bachman had called him Molly. There were definitely a few girlish features in him. She guessed that he was probably a sickly young man. His clothes were baggy and didn't fit him well, and his hairless face was mostly hidden by a large hanging hat. To her surprise, he ran up to Jeremiah and threw himself into his arms. Even from where Abby stood, she could hear his quiet sobs. Thought, lost you, died, Sam stammered as Jeremiah gently comforted him. Good afternoon, Ambrose's voice rang out, drawing everyone's attention. My name is Ambrose, and this is Mr. Jacob, he said, pointing to his black-clad companion. And of course, you've already met Miss Sarah. She's already told us quite a bit about you. And this is Sam, he chuckled. The group turned and watched Sam kiss Jeremiah. The entire Hawthorne company stood in silent amazement. What's the matter, Mom? Sarah smirked. Nothing. I just didn't know, Abby stammered, looking at her daughter. I mean, I know there aren't many women here, but... Sarah burst out laughing and pointed at the couple again. Look again, Mom. Don't let the clothes fool you. Sam's hat fell to the ground, exposing the long blonde braid it had once concealed. Mom, let me introduce you to Sam, Sarah giggled. More like Samantha. She's Dad's fiancée. Fiancée? Sarah nodded and the couple walked slowly, holding hands towards the group. Abby was struck by the look on Sam's face. It was contorted, as if she had just smelled something very rotten. I know why you're all here, Sam grinned. I also know that one of you tried to kill my Jeremiah. Now I want you off my property. Your property? Thomas asked. I'm sorry, Sarah interjected with a smile. I should have introduced her better. Miss Samantha Jenkins Wilcox, this is my mother and her husband. I want you to leave before dark, Sam announced and turned and led Jeremiah away. There's sand in that girl, isn't there? Ambrose grinned. She dresses like that to avoid unnecessary attention. You know, the mine owner's daughter roaming the woods? Strange, but it makes a certain amount of sense, doesn't it? But we're not done yet, Horace intervened. The lady said, Jacob growled threateningly, that you had better leave before nightfall. I'd heed that warning if I were you, mister. Horace and Thomas realized from the look in Jacob's eyes that they were in immediate danger. The tension was diffused by Ambrose's firm voice. I'm sure we have many more questions and topics to discuss. However, it seems that time is needed to cool down. I would suggest you return to the Weed Inn. We'll clean up and cool off, then we'll have dinner and talk. Would that be all right with you, Zeb? Do you think you can convince Widow Brown to cook something for the big feast this evening? I think she can do it, Zeb snorted. It's been a long time since we've had this many people gathered at our inn. We'll make sure you both are well rewarded. Well, now that everyone's gone, we certainly won't be giving up a dime. With those words, they all went back into the house, leaving Abby, Thomas, and Horace in place. Zeb told them he would take the harness and drive them into town. All the way, they rode in silence. When they reached the inn, the trio gathered in one of the rooms. Abby was the first to speak. Is it true? She hissed at Thomas. Is it true what Jeremiah said? What exactly? Is it true what Jeremiah said about the Mendeses? How would I know? Abigail, I wasn't even around when all this happened. And we don't even know if what Jeremiah said is true or just gossip, Horace said calmly. Besides, Horace added, even if there is some truth to it, it happened 5 years ago. It's already in the past. That's important, Abby hissed. If I was lied to, that means I betrayed Jeremiah before he betrayed me. My revenge wasn't justified because I cheated on him and slept with his brother. I'm sorry, Horace said calmly. I wasn't trying to say it doesn't matter, only that it happened years ago. It's not something that can be changed or taken back. I understand that, Mr. Horace, but it changes my mind. If it is true, then I must question those who lied to me. I must know if my father is involved. Jeremiah was right about one thing. I didn't ask my father to try to find him. I was so angry and hurt. Abby, you can't blame yourself, Thomas began. Of course I can. I didn't believe him when he came back either. So who else can I blame? You, Thomas? You didn't try to find him either, did you? You're right. I didn't try. I was gone so long that I didn't know if Jeremiah was capable of such things or not. So instead I was trying to comfort and protect you. Abby turned and stared at the lawyer. Did my father know, Mr. Horace? What? Did you and my father know that Jeremiah was in a Denver prison? Yes, Horace sighed. We found out he was there. And you never told me. What was the point of that, Mrs. Hawthorne? The Mendeses had already talked to you and left. The warrant for his arrest had already been postponed. And frankly, ma'am, you were already sleeping in the same bed as Thomas. What was the point of us telling you that? I don't know, Abby stammered as tears began to stream down her face. Maybe it would have changed the way I felt about him when he came home. Please, Mrs. Hawthorne, what you know wouldn't have changed the outcome of our confrontation with Jeremiah. Everything has already been done. Now, Horace continued, we will have to recognize that we have little to offer your ex-husband to convince him to sell Henry a portion of the ranch. Now, we're going to have to convince him to join us, to make him a partner. Good luck with that, Thomas grumbled. He sure hates us now. He thinks we sent the Swede to kill him. Yes, Horace sighed. I wish the Swede hadn't. I don't know what he was thinking. All three stood looking at each other in silence. Next chapter. Ambrose's group arrived at the View Hotel just before sunset. The sensible protective clothing necessary for hunting or fishing had disappeared from them. In its place were outfits that suggested that Ambrose, Samantha, and even Jacob belonged to Denver's high society. Sarah, Desiree, and Monique were dressed in dresses common for the time and looked like young ladies, which they were. Samantha entered the house under the arm of Jeremiah, who was still dressed in his usual attire but already clean. Samantha's transformation, however, was remarkable. The effeminate, shy tomboy had been replaced by an attractive, slender woman who wasn't afraid to look anyone in the eye. She wore a stylish Victorian dress that emphasized her small assets. Although Desiree and Abby could be described as naturally more beautiful, Samantha's presence demanded everyone's attention. My goodness, Miss Jenkins! Zeb exclaimed. Well, aren't you a beauty? I haven't seen you so dressed up since Miss Augusta Tabor's big party a couple of years ago. It's been a long time, kind sir, Sam smiled and curtsied. I haven't worn it since that night. It's been hidden in my closet, but today is a special occasion. Ah, yes. You are returning to Leadville and Jeremiah will follow shortly. Yes, but we will only be in Leadville until the wedding. Then we will leave for Denver. Well, I shall. So this is a real goodbye night then? Sam nodded. Then I thought I'd add one more thing to it. After Jeremiah leaves, I'm taking Desiree and Lil Mo with me to Louisiana. Really? I thought you were going to Aspen, Ambrose interjected. No, I've been doing this too long, Zeb sighed. This isn't the life I was hoping to give Desiree, and certainly not the one I want for Lil Mo. Now come on in and sit down. This may be the last time the lobby of this hotel is filled with people and food. Widow Brown has outdone herself and has prepared fried chicken with many specialties. She sure is special, Jeremiah grinned. Maybe she'd like Louisiana? Desiree burst into laughter and Zeb smiled broadly. Well, he said slowly, I kind of already asked her. She's coming with us. Along with Robbie, Desiree laughed. Yeah, Zeb moaned, and all those damn dogs. We'll look like damn settlers going the wrong way, east to Louisiana instead of west. Ambrose's company laughed and congratulated him. Soon everyone was seated. The tension that hung over the assembled men hardly interfered with their enjoyment of the fine meal. Serious discussion of the purpose of Hawthorne's visit was postponed, and the conversation turned to mining, the weather, and Denver. When all was ready, Ambrose got out 2 bottles of excellent port wine. After everyone had been served, he cleared his throat. I suppose we should get to the point of this little meeting, he began. First of all, we never got to finish getting to know each other. Jeremiah and Sarah have already let us know who you are, but I must introduce myself. My name is Ambrose Whitebreck. Perhaps you've heard of my brother, Robert Whitebreck? He was treasurer of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad when they had that little incident with Bat Masterson. Mrs. Hawthorne, I'm sure there are doubts about the veracity of the information Jeremiah shared with you yesterday. The Pinkertons I hired were very thorough. I know that the evidence in question has been notarized and is kept in a safe in Denver. Mr. Whitebreck, Horace interrupted, concern audible in his voice. I hope you're not implying that— I'm not implying anything, Mr. Horace. I'm simply saying that we have notarized depositions from Pedro and Maria Mendez regarding the false charges related to the warrant for Jeremiah's arrest and his alleged indiscretion. It is clear from their testimony that they were threatened and coerced into giving false testimony against Jeremiah. They stated that it was Swede who threatened them and that it was he who shot, or should I say wounded, Mr. Mendez in the arm. Mr. Horace, you and I both know that the border courts are very suspicious. Justice is done here with a bag of coins or the muzzle of a gun, just like in our legal system. These depositions were taken to expose the lies surrounding Jeremiah. Whether they are related to your current employer is for everyone to decide for themselves. Be that as it may, there is no warrant out for Jeremiah's arrest and all charges against him can be proven. So Jeremiah has told us everything you asked him to. Unfortunately, I must inform you that Jeremiah cannot give you what you want, even if he were inclined to do so. And he's not inclined to, Sam interjected, much to the amusement of those gathered around the table. I'm sorry, she said embarrassed, as Jeremiah reached out and took her by the shoulder. His loving smile was unmistakable. Never apologize for protecting your man, my dear, Ambrose grinned. You see, Ambrose continued, turning to everyone, he can't give you what you want because he no longer owns the business or any of its holdings. What? Thomas and Horace exclaimed amicably. That's right, Jeremiah said, grinning. I sold the livery to my father's partner and paid off whatever was left of the loan. Then I sold my share of the ranch, too. It no longer brought back anything but unpleasant memories for me. So when a pretty girl accepted my marriage proposal, I sold it. Everything had already been signed and agreed, and it would start the day after our wedding. The deal I made secured me a position at a bank in Denver. It gives me a small stake in that bank, and I will be working and learning the financial business under the guidance of a mentor. I'm sure this will sound boring to you all, but through this, I will be able to provide a future for my wife and children. But why? Abby asked quietly, looking intently at Jeremiah. Why didn't you say so sooner? Why would I? Jeremiah growled. You all ambush me again, and then you apologize and try to bribe me with my own daughter. Why should I trust any of you? I wasn't sure how far you'd go to get your way now that you'd brought the Swede. I realized I was in danger, but better me than my friends and family. I knew Zeb would protect Desiree and Lil Mo. I also assumed you didn't know about Ambrose and Sam. I was sure you didn't know about Sarah either. The simple truth is that I will die before I let anyone hurt my girls. Sam put her arm around his shoulders and looked at him intently. I met with Zeb last night and told him that if anything was going to happen, it would involve the Swede. Turns out I was right. Zeb had been following him and saw him get his rifle out of the wagon and start walking toward Taylor's Pass. When he tried to ambush me, Zeb took him down like a dog. Now I can focus on my future. I was happy on the ranch. I had a wife and daughter that I loved, but one of them was taken from me and the other broke my heart. Very kind people gave me my daughter back and an angel healed my heart. I look forward every night to holding that angel in my arms. Someone gave you Sarah back? Abby asked. Jeremiah nodded and looked at Ambrose. When I ran away, I must have had angels watching over me, Sarah interjected. I didn't know where to go at first. I heard you say Daddy had gone to Denver before he came back that day. So I went to Colorado Springs first. I got lucky and hooked up with one family that was headed to Denver. When I got to Denver, I started asking questions at the city jail. Then I went to one of the churches. The Reverend and his wife sheltered me for a few days and then introduced me to Mr. Ambrose. Mr. Ambrose took me to Leadville to introduce me to Sam. She took me in. They told everyone I was her new maid. Why? Abby asked. Actually, it was at my suggestion, Ambrose explained. You see, at the time, I wasn't ready. Ready for what? Mr. Horace asked. To tell you the truth, I wasn't ready for this visit. I needed to make sure your man couldn't track Sarah to Jeremiah too quickly. There were still a few loose ends that required my attention. Fortunately, they were resolved long before your man left for Ashcroft. We were able to get Sarah here only a few days after she was discovered at Leadville. I have another small confession to make, Ambrose grinned. I did not return Sarah to her father with the most honorable of intentions. I knew that Jeremiah was an honest man and that my gift would influence his decision to sell. Jeremiah did not say he sold his share to me and my partners. It is also my group's bank, and I will be the one working with Jeremiah. He is great with numbers and should deliver good results. And the fact that he and his bride-to-be are interested in the bank is an added bonus. I didn't buy Jeremiah out just as a favor to John Jenkins. I agree with Henry Thompson. Besides taking care of my good friend's daughter, whom I love like my own, it's also a very profitable investment. Those placers they've already found around Pikes Peak may have all been dug up by now, but there's a very good chance that all that gold must have come from somewhere. It's quite likely that sooner or later someone will discover where from, and then this little valley will become extremely valuable. With a controlling interest in the Hawthorne Ranch, I could get a foothold in the valley. But Mr. Whitebreck, Horace pointed out cautiously, Henry Thompson owns most of this valley. That is plainly true, Mr. Horace. However, I bought Jeremiah's share not only because it might be a good investment, but also to get a little revenge. You see, sir, my wife's cousin, Ambrose's voice became low and threatening, lives in Kansas City. We're not particularly close to that side of the family, so my wife and I only found out about him a few years ago. This cousin has a daughter who married a handsome young man. A few years ago, she traveled with him to Colorado to help his grandfather run a ranch. They were unlucky. They arrived just in the middle of the Railroad War. As you know, there was a lot of nasty underground business going on at that time. Never in their worst nightmares did they think they would run into people who would try to chase Grandpa off his land. Not just chase him off, but burn him out. They would be threatened and then terrorized by a big light-colored male bear. My husband still has burns on his hands from trying to rescue his grandfather from a burning house. His last name is Wilson. Horace looked very uncomfortable. You can imagine my surprise when I spoke to this man who made an impression on a good friend of mine. This man had won the heart of my friend's daughter, and his stories of the past were eerily familiar to me. I even learned that there was a man working for Thompson who looked like the son of a bitch who had done this to my wife's relatives. Well, that made me very curious. I was even more surprised when I found out that this same man was buying up land and businesses in the area. It was a blessing from heaven when I learned that he had greatly exceeded his line of credit. It was like manifest destiny. It took me a while, but eventually I bought out all of his debts. I needed to make ends meet. I figured I'd take almost everything he owned except the ranch when I got all his markers at the end of the month. Oh, hellfire. I wouldn't even be surprised if there aren't a couple fires on the ranch before winter. Ambrose's grin sent shivers running down everyone's spine. By law or at gunpoint, Mr. Horace, please tell your employer that everyone associated with him is in danger because of all this. Besides, sir, Denver is not the safest city, even for lawyers. There was silence around the table as everyone pondered Ambrose's thinly veiled threat. Now that this unpleasant business is over with, Ambrose continued, almost ignoring the party at Hawthorne, would anyone care to smoke a cigar with me and Jacob? Hell yeah, Zeb stated, entering the kitchen, right after I help clean up the place. Come on, Pappy, Desiree laughed. Sarah and I will help get everything done. Zeb grinned from ear to ear. Jeremiah? Ambrose asked. Please excuse Jeremiah, Sam interjected. He needs to spend some time with his fiancée. Jeremiah, would you mind escorting me for a little walk? I'd be honored. The couple stood up and walked outside hand in hand. The guests left the table in silence and dispersed into small groups. Horace and Thomas headed upstairs to their rooms, while Abby lingered downstairs for a few minutes before slipping out the back door. She needed to talk to Jeremiah and apologize. She also knew Sam wouldn't be happy about this interruption. Still, this might be her last chance to talk to her ex-husband. As she approached them, she heard their voices. I'm sorry, Jeremiah. I didn't mean to bother you like that. Shh, sweetheart. You're not a nuisance. It's just that I'm scared. I know what they say about me behind my back. That a man would only marry a harpy like me for my money. They say I'm a spoiled little princess who will surely drive her husband to his grave. But you know that's not true, don't you? Jeremiah chuckled and smiled. Yes, I know it's not true. However, about the corruption. Okay, there may be some truth to it. Sam suppressed a slight chuckle. But I'm getting better. I was just so angry at James for leaving me in Leadville and spending a year in the mountains working at one of my father's mines. We hadn't even been married 2 years and he was already gone. He didn't even give me the baby he promised. When I was told he died of pneumonia, I collapsed. I know a lot of people thought I was crazy, but it was just the pain. It was the realization that the beautiful life I had planned for us had died. All I was left with was the grim hopelessness of becoming a widow before I even turned 20. After that, I looked at every man who sought my hand with those dead eyes. I did this for 4 years and probably did become the harpy they say I am. I know I went to Mrs. Tabor's big party kicking and screaming. I'm glad Daddy demanded that I be there. Only later did I find out that he wanted me to meet a man he respected very much. It was you, Jeremiah Hawthorne. And when I first met you, I was ashamed. Ashamed? She nodded and smiled mischievously at him. I wanted you to like me so much that it scared me. I haven't had that feeling since James. When you put me in your arms the first time we danced, I almost cried. It was the first time I allowed myself to hope that I would be happy again. But then I started to look at myself from the outside and the kind of person I had become. I swore to God that if you gave me a chance, I would become the kind of woman you would be proud to marry. Samantha, I was always proud to be with you, even when you dressed like a man. Sam laughed and playfully slapped his arm. It was an honor to be around you, Jeremiah said grimly. Sam, I love you. Even when I act like a spoiled child sometimes? Even when I let my temper take over? I love you no matter what, Samantha Jenkins Wilcox. You tell me about how I changed your life, but you changed my life even more. You know how broken I was when you met me. What they did to me just killed me. I know, sweetheart. That's why I'm so angry with them. How could you do that to someone you said you loved? I'm sorry if I let my claws out a little. Jeremiah laughed softly. No one can say they don't know how you feel. Jeremiah, I'm sorry. I'm trying very hard. Hush, beautiful. It's all right. It's nice when someone loves you enough to fight for you. Jeremiah's words sank deeply into Abby's heart. She tried, but couldn't suppress a sob. Who's there? Sam barked. I'm so sorry. What do you want? Sam was clearly starting to get upset until Jeremiah put his arm around her and spoke softly. It's okay, sweetheart, he said softly. Let her say what she needs to say. She can't hurt us. Abby watched Sam melt into his arms. Her body seemed to relax, and Abby thought she even heard a quiet sigh. Abby fought the memory of how safe she had once felt in that embrace. I just wanted to apologize to both of you. Samantha, I'm sorry that our visit jeopardized Jeremiah's life. It was not part of my plans, and I will ask Daddy about it when I get home. I'll also ask him about the Mendez and about Old Man Wilson. I just can't believe Daddy's behind all this, but I promise you, Jeremiah, I will. I just can't believe Daddy is as evil as you think he is. Maybe he's not evil, Jeremiah snorted. Maybe he's just a damn carpetbagger. Feeds on the misfortune of others. Either way, I'm sure he'll regret what he's done someday. Whether you believe it or not, nothing's going to change, Abigail, but it could cost you dearly when his chickens come home. Do you really think that Ambrose— Of course I don't. Yes, I believe he will do exactly what he said he would. Ambrose is a good man, but he has a dark side. If the Swede had anything to do with what happened to Old Man Wilson and Ambrose's relatives, I have no doubt that Ambrose will do what he said. Abby, I don't hate you anymore, so I hope you don't get hurt. But I won't shed a tear if something bad happens to your father or Thomas. I know you don't want to believe it, but they took away all the good things in my life. Thomas took my wife and daughter from me, and King Henry tried to take the ranch away from my family. I hope they both meet the Swede in hell. I guess I can understand that, but for the way I treated you, and for betraying you along with Thomas, I am truly sorry. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I doubt we'll ever see each other again, and I just wanted you to know that. I hope you'll ask Sarah to come visit me someday. I don't think so. As long as Thomas and your father are around, I doubt she'll ever come. She nodded and brushed away a tear. Goodbye, Jeremiah. She turned and walked back to the inn, knowing that long, hard conversations with her father awaited her in the future. She also suspected that she would likely never see her ex-husband again. Next chapter. St. Louis, Missouri. Spring, 1905. Abigail Hawthorne walked slowly into the cottage. It had been a long winter, but spring brought hope. She prayed it would bring new life to her as well. It had been 19 years since they had moved to St. Louis. After they returned from Ashcroft, she talked to her father. He told her that he had secretly given the Swede a portion of the expected profits. Henry said that the Swede had acted of his own free will when he had threatened the Mendez and when he had tried to kill Jeremiah. He swore to her that he hadn't initiated those actions, but he admitted that he'd taken advantage of them after they'd occurred. Abby wasn't entirely sure of this, but shortly after their conversation, several events occurred that limited her options. First, Edmund Horace had returned to Denver. A week later, he left town. No one knew where he had gone except for his last statement, east, where things are more civilized. Thomas gave up and sold the rest of the ranch to Ambrose. Thomas then left to take up prospecting in the west again. Abby watched his departure anxiously, realizing that after the ranch was sold and everyone had moved away, her father was all she had left. She found out about Thomas a few years later when she received a telegraph letter from him. The telegram was from San Francisco, saying they had found gold in the Klondike and he was sailing for Alaska. She never heard from him again. Ambrose Whitebreck turned out to be a man of his word. It took a little longer than expected, but by the spring of 1886, her father had sold off almost everything to cover his debts. He managed to sell the ranch at a small profit, although one of the barns burned to the ground just before Christmas. It was enough to buy a small cottage and a small store. Henry Thompson left Colorado a very embittered man. He became even more depressed and discouraged in 1891 when large-scale gold mining began in the Cripple Creek and Victor areas. To serve these areas, the railroad built a branch line that ran through their old valley. Ambrose Whitebreck and his investors became even richer. Many years passed, which were difficult at times. Abby and Henry worked in the store until Henry became too ill. In the last year, she sold it to take care of him. In December, he died, and now she was alone. She was lonely, but partly by choice. She had had several suitors over the years, but she had never thought of leaving her father. The ones she liked the most were the ones her father disliked the most. Now that she was well into her 50s, she was alone. She walked over to her bed and sat down. The silence in the cottage was almost overwhelming. She reached for a small, ornate jewelry box that stood next to the bed. Opening it, She pulled out two items very dear to her, a letter and a telegraph. The first was a letter she had received from Sarah 4 years ago. The second was the telegram she had received the day before. It was a reply to a telegram sent a month earlier. She slowly unfolded the letter and began to read the words she already knew by heart. Dear Mother, I am writing to you to fulfill a promise I made to a very dear man. He thought it would be good for me and those I love to write down my thoughts and feelings and send them to you. He said that whether you receive this letter or not, it would be helpful for me to write and say all that I wanted to say. I can't say that I welcomed his request. I think he knows what he is talking about, for he is a doctor. I also know that he loves me deeply and cares only for me. In truth, I would do almost anything for Dr. Harold Thornton, my husband. I think I should cut to the chase. Mother, I forgive you. I forgive you for not believing me and not defending me afterward. I won't say I fully understand why you did that, but if it makes you feel better, I forgive you. I hope you understand why I ran away. After I told you what Uncle Thomas did, none of you believed me. It was like what happened to Daddy. Nobody believed him either. I felt unprotected, so I needed to find someone to take care of me. It was a miracle that I found Dad so quickly. It was an even bigger miracle that I found Harold a few years after Daddy and Sam were married. A few months ago, I got a letter from Desiree. It was the woman with the little girl you met at the Jenkins near Ashcroft. She wrote that she and everyone were doing well and that she had remarried. Little Mo is growing up to be a real beauty, and her papa is already threatening to skin some of the local boys if they get too persistent. Zeb and Widow Brown are still unmarried, but they are always together and will be for the rest of their lives. It was Desiree's letter that gave Harold the idea of writing to you. As I said, I am now married to a doctor. You have two grandchildren, a boy, John Ambrose, and a girl, Samantha Desiree. We moved here to Santa Fe about 10 years ago with Dad, Sam, and my half-sisters. Daddy is the president of a bank in Ambrose. He and Sam have three cute blonde-haired devils. Of course, that's not entirely true. All three of my stepsisters are pretty cute for the most part, but they all got Sam's personality. It's funny to watch them around Daddy. Each of them thinks they've got him wrapped around their finger. It's even funnier when Sam chases them away, sits on Daddy's lap and lets them know that Daddy is hers and will always be hers. I swear I laugh every time I see all three girls stick out their bottom lips and pout. I once asked Daddy if he ever gets tired of the constant turmoil of having four girls in the house. He just smiled, hugged me, and said that he missed spending 5 years with me. So this is just heaven. He also said he couldn't ask for more. He has a wife who loves him as much as he loves her, 4 wonderful daughters, a grandson and granddaughter who are hanging on the moon. We have nice homes, food on the table, and good health. We even have a doctor in the family. He says we are very blessed. I can't argue with that. Before I go, I must let you know that you are welcome to come and visit us. I can't say that Grandpa or Uncle Thomas would be happy, but you would. Even Sam said she'd be on her best behavior if you came. She's changed a lot over the years. She's much happier now. She says it's because of Daddy, and while I'm sure that's true, she loves her 3 girls very much. It's time to finish this letter. By writing this letter, I have fulfilled my husband's wish, and I think I will soon begin to fulfill his other wish. Harold has hinted that we will have another child. If you ever decide to come, just telegraph the date of your arrival, and we will pick you up at the train station. Best wishes from your daughter, Sarah. Abby wiped away her tears, folded the tattered letter again and put it back in the box. Slowly, she unfolded the telegram. She would wait until Henry had passed away and the cottage was put in order before answering the telegram. She contacted Sarah and asked if the offer to come for a visit was still on. The day before, Sarah replied, "I'm looking forward to meeting you. We will definitely get together." The grandchildren are thrilled. Abby didn't know how things would work out, but she knew she had to try. Even if she only got to see her grandchildren once, it would be worth it. She bought a train ticket to Santa Fe and telegraphed her arrival within a day of hearing back from Sarah. It was spring, a time of new beginnings. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.